Hi there, so this is the second part of two videos that will help you with the 8-mark final question in National 5 Scottish text paper for Jekyll and Hyde. In the first part we looked at likely questions that could come up. We looked at a clear answer structure for how you might approach the 8-mark question, and we looked at a sample response. In this video, we're going to have a look at a second sample response, and I'm also going to give you some tips for how you might effectively revise for this part of the exam. So let's have a look first of all at this sample answer for the 8-marker. And here we're dealing with this question by referring to this extract and to elsewhere in the novel, show how the author creates an interesting character. You might find it helpful when you get get into your exam and you get to your final 8-mark question to highlight the key phrase in the question, the phrase that you really need to home in on if you're going to answer this question in line with the way it's been asked and the way that you're intended to. And here the key phrase is an interesting character. So this is an open character question. It allows you to pick a character that you want to talk about, provided that character of course features in the given extract that you have in front of you in the paper. Highlighting that phrase, an interesting character, will just allow you to make sure that you are focusing in on that, and that you should be, as we'll see in a second, dropping that phrase in with your answers to ensure that your comments are on the task. So as in the first video, I am advising candidates to set out their answer in a certain way, and I think putting the headings for each section just helps your marker to see where your answers are, and it makes it easy for them to reward you with the marks that you are due. So I always ask people to write down first of all commonality as a heading, and remember in the commonality points what we're looking for really is where is the interesting character in the given extract, and then where is this interesting character developed in the rest of the novella. These 2 bullet points really answer these 2 questions. So in the given extract, remember beginning your commonality points with these phrases in the given extract and elsewhere in the novella. It just keeps you focused on what you're supposed to do. Hyde is an interesting character because he causes Utterson a great deal of discomfort and unease. And notice also that I've actually used that phrase, an interesting character, that is in the question because I want to be sure that I'm focused on the task. Elsewhere in the novella, Hyde is interesting, there's that key word again, because he produces an aggressive reaction from those he meets. So there's my 2 marks for the commonality. To move on, of course, we've only got a further 2 marks available for the given extract. So we want to head this section with a little title, given extract, to make it clear. And of course, we're looking for just one quote from the given extract and then one comment that is focused on the task. So here's my quote: not all of these together could explain the hitherto unknown disgust, loathing and fear with which Mr. Utterson regarded him, and him is obviously Hyde. So in my comment, what I want to do is make sure that it's focused on this idea of an interesting character. So Hyde is an interesting character because Utterson struggles at times to understand why he is so revolting to him. An interesting character because that phrase just helps you to make sure that you are focused on the task. Of course, the second set of 4, or the next 4 rather, marks in the 8-marker question are given be testing your knowledge of the novella as a whole. And so again, I would recommend putting the heading elsewhere in the novella, and we're looking for 2 quotes and 2 appropriate comments here. So here's one of my quotes. He tramples a young girl without caring, like a juggernaut. I've just added in a little bit of context there because it helps us to understand the quote. He tramples a young girl without caring, like a juggernaut. That would get me 1 mark. Remember, I'm wanting to focus on this idea of an interesting character. Hyde is interesting. There we go. Hyde is interesting because he is clearly totally evil and heartless. That would get me the mark. And he murders Danvers Carew with ape-like fury. Again, just a little bit of context for the quote. It gets me a mark. And then again, Hyde is interesting because he is ferocious and violent like a wild animal. So there is a second sample answer for the 8 marker, and hopefully you can see the structure working and the sorts of things that you would need to write in order to get the marks at this level. But I also want in this video to just offer a few words of advice about how you might go about preparing for this part of the paper. And one of the things that I do with my students is I give them a grid that looks like this, normally on A3 paper, and I look at all the kind of the key areas that could potentially come up in the exam. So you could be asked to focus on a specific character. I think it is seriously unlikely that you would be asked to focus on a character as minor, for example, as Poole or even Enfield or even Lanyon. I think really there are 3 main characters in Jekyll and Hyde. They are Jekyll, Hyde, and Utterson. So I think you're fairly safe if you look specifically at these 3 characters. And of course, that would cover you for an open character question as well, if it's just write about an interesting character. But then you also have to consider themes. Now, duality, good versus evil, and human nature, they are different ways of expressing similar ideas. The duality in people that Stevenson is kind of advancing in this novella really boils down to the fact that human beings, have both good and evil impulses within them. So to prepare for the theme of duality kind of is to prepare for the theme of good versus evil. And then, of course, that is the way Stevenson sees human nature. So you can kind of wrap all these 3 ideas into one, and of course that also would cover you for an open theme question where you can pick the theme that you want to write about. Another theme that maybe not covered though in these 3 would maybe be the theme of reputation, which is obviously quite an important one in Jekyll and Hyde, so perhaps you should make a separate line for that. And then you've got setting, which infrequently but still could come up, and tension, which I think is again unlikely but possibly could come up. And so once you've got your kind of list of things that you could potentially be asked about in the 8 marker, then I suggest 3 different columns. Now, you'll have noticed from the sample answer that you only need 2 quotes, or to refer to 2 incidents specifically in the part of the answer on elsewhere in the novella. But the reason I get my candidates to prepare 3 quotes or 3 key incidents for each of these is because you don't know, you could be unlucky and actually one of your incidents or one of your quotes may be actually given to you in the extract, in which case you wouldn't be able to use that for the elsewhere in the novella answers. So preparing 3 covers you much more effectively than just the 2. I should also just say that while it looks like there's lots and lots of different things that would then have to remember and to revise, what you should ideally be doing is looking for quotes or incidents that work on more than one of these lines. So, for example, a quote or an incident that helps us to understand the duality of human beings would also potentially work for Jekyll. So that quote that I often say is maybe one of the most useful in the whole novella. Man is not truly one, but truly two. I think it is. That tells us a great deal about duality, about good versus evil, about human nature, but it also, to an extent, tells us about the character of Jekyll. So that's a quote that works on for a number of different questions, and if you can find quotes or incidents that do that, then what it does is it just cuts down the number of different things that you need to remember in order to prepare effectively for this part of the exam. So over the last two videos, we've looked at likely questions that could come up. We've looked at an answering structure that you should follow. We've looked at two sample responses, and then we've looked at some advice about how to prepare. So if you are doing Jekyll and Hyde this year for National 5 Scottish text, then I hope you feel like this has been helpful. All the very best for your exam.